Hello and welcome to the Formidable Over 40 podcast. I'm Sarah Pittendrigh, a mum, award-winning entrepreneur, cancer survivor, mentor and coach. This podcast is all about sharing stories and showing you that you're never too old and it's never too late to achieve your goals and change your life. This episode features Lucy Griffiths, author of best-selling book, Make Money While You Sleep. Lucy coaches business owners to create passive income so they can work less and live more. We all need a bit more of that. Lucy has sold over 50,000 courses and has packaged all of this experience into helping other people to do the same, to turn their own experience into digital courses and scale their businesses. Along her journey, Lucy has also been a TV journalist, worked around the world, including in Asia and the Middle East, and achieved a master's in coaching. So let's get ready to soak up Lucy's knowledge on this episode of the Formidable Over 40 podcast. Hi, Lucy.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
And it is so fabulous that you've taken the time to join us today. For our listeners, Lucy, would you just give them a little bit of an introduction as to who you are?
Well, I'm a mum to my son, Ben, who is 7. And that is a huge priority to me. As well, I run a business from home. I work school hours. My son is autistic, so I fit a lot of my life around him. But despite, working school hours, all those limitations that brings as a single parent, I've sold over 50,000 courses. I have written a best-selling book, which was published in the UK and the US, and it's just being published in China, which is really exciting.
Amazing.
I get to build a business that has really given me that freedom through creating passive income. So it's enabled me to sort of live in the way that I want to live rather than feeling like I'm on the treadmill. Mm-hmm. Before I created courses and became an entrepreneur, I worked as a TV journalist, which you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And I was working mainly in conflict zones around the world, spent a lot of time in places like Iraq, or, was working on stories on North Korea or China, Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And, my life was very, very different. I spent a lot of time in refugee camps. Mm-hmm. And that kind of life, well, I was hugely passionate about it. And I still am really passionate about those stories. It was not practical for me when I had my son. Mm. And so I had to find another way of working. And so that really inspired my whole entrepreneurial journey.
Gosh, I mean, I can't wait to get further into this podcast and hear all about this, because there's got to be some absolutely fascinating stories to come out of all of this. But there'll be a lot of listeners who, my podcast is very much about encouraging women who are maybe, they've given so much of their life to everybody else and they've hit midlife and they think, well, that's it. This is it now. It's there's nothing else for me. And I want them to understand that, take and embrace everything that you've learned and everything you've put into your armor, and now step into the shadows. This is actually your time to shine. And, you're an absolute glowing example of how this can be achieved. So what does Formidable Over 40 mean to you? And if there's somebody sat there feeling that their life's very much in the shadows, what do you think they need to do to be that Formidable Over 40 woman?
I'm trying to actually think when I set up my business, but I think I was just 40 when I set up my business. So, being 40 something has absolutely been part of this whole entrepreneurial adventure. And I didn't have a clue what I was doing. Mm-hmm. You make it up as you go along, but you are never too old. It is never too late. Mm-hmm. I have clients who I work with. My oldest client is 81 and he is this wonderful, he has the most incredible stories of playing jazz in the 1960s and working with Dr. Martin Luther King. Oh. And now he is creating a membership on loneliness and coaching young people about how to connect and network. And you are never too old to do this.
Amazing.
You can really take your skills, your passions, your enthusiasms, and turn that into a business. That is the incredible thing about social media, about YouTube, about the way that the world works. You can live anywhere in the world and you can package up your skills, your experience, your knowledge, and turn that into something that is, a business. Works absolutely for your systems, your lifestyle, whatever you have going on. Yeah. And no barrier is there anymore. You can't say I'm too old, because that's nonsense. Yeah. Whatever disabilities or ailments you may have or illnesses, yes, of course they are, definitely things that you have to overcome, but they can be overcome, because we've seen it every day that people do incredible things despite the odds, and you can do that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, absolutely wonderful advice. And we'll come up to self-limiting beliefs later on in the interview, because often it is that, isn't it? And we've got to sort of try and break through our comfort zone. But as I say, we're going to come to that. What I'd like to know is that if we go back to Lucy, who was 15, what would Lucy's dreams and hobbies have been?
So when I was 15, I was absolutely desperate to be a journalist. And I was lucky enough, I had an uncle who, my parents lived abroad. So my parents travel around the world. And so I spent most of my life sort of from a very young age. I went to boarding school and my parents were abroad. So my uncle, I had this uncle who'd come and pick me up for kind of half terms and weekends. And he was a journalist. He was a sports journalist. And he was this huge influence on my life. And he made me see that it was possible. And so all I wanted to do was be a journalist. And I was desperate. I set up like the school magazine and, did all these things. Yeah. And while I definitely doubted my sort of intellect and, was I good enough and were my grades going to be good enough? He made me see that actually it didn't matter that you weren't, he would say, well, I left school at 16. It doesn't matter. And, he was very much about just making sure that you are, yes, of course, whatever talents you have is important, but being personable and nice to people and being willing to work, those qualities are so important and so overlooked, but actually they are the things that make people, they will support you because they think, oh, that person's nice, I'm going to, definitely be an ally to them. Yeah. And those things are so often ignored because of, checklists of whatever tick exams boxes you got 30 years ago or whatever it may be, when those things are completely irrelevant now.
Yeah, absolutely. They really are. And so if we talk from Lucy, who's 15, to Lucy now, who's this absolute wonderful coach, and you've written this fantastic book. Tell us about, the coaching that you offer online and how you're helping not just female entrepreneurs, you're helping anybody really, aren't you, to get invisible. Tell us about that. And what was the story behind how you founded your business?
So when my son was born, I had a really traumatic birth experience, and I woke up the day after I'd given birth, and I sort of stood up to go to the toilet and basically peed myself. Right. And I had chronic incontinence that meant I tore in 3 places. I couldn't really function in the way that I did before. I would literally get out of the house, walk down the street, cough, and wet my trousers and have to go back home again. Oh, and I, life as I knew it dramatically shrunk. I couldn't go back to work. There was no way I could work in a war zone. Before, literally, when I was on maternity leave, I was covering the war in Ukraine. Gosh. And suddenly then I could barely walk down the street or down a hill without peeing myself. And so, I had to do something that was from home. There was no way I could go to an office because I just didn't have the confidence to do that. So I needed to find something that worked for me. And I set up, first of all, a business. I'd already done my coaching master's degree. So I did a coaching master's degree while I was in Iraq. I wanted to do something else. And I was using coaching skills to help the people that I was working with. I was working with Syrian and Iraqi refugees who were setting up a TV station. So I realized that I needed a different way of working with them. And that's where I got interested in sort of PTSD and psychology and really wanting to work with them. But after giving birth, sort of working in kind of war zones felt so far removed. And I had to think, okay, what do I know that I can help other people with? And so that's when I really thought, okay, I could teach people how to be camera confident. And, I already did a lot of that. I did a lot of video production with kind of CEOs of major global companies, whether it's, Ford or Unilever. And so I had that skill set. I knew that there were people who were incredibly accomplished, but they actually, you put them in front of a camera and they would quake and be really nervous and mumble and stutter and all these things that we all do. But they wanted to come across as really polished and, confident. Yeah. And so I was working one-to-one with small business owners and larger corporates. And I realized that actually, me going out to do a day of filming, I remember I had a day filming at Manchester United and I was sort of there all day, and that just didn't fit with my son and being there for childcare, everything else. It was such a big drama to actually get there and do it. Yeah. So that's when I decided, right, I'm going to go all in on courses. So I built a course and, my son, my son was playing with his Brio set at my feet and I'd be doing things. And I got it done. And, from that course, I've sold, it's, almost 60,000 courses. Wow. And, that literally was a $19 course that sells through Facebook ads, through, other ads, plus, YouTube, all those other places. But basically what happens is somebody buys that course and they're upsold into multiple different products. And that literally, that system of selling has given me this recurring income. It's given me a safety net for everything that's happened in the last few years. And during the pandemic, we had an Airbnb. I was still with my husband, and we had an Airbnb business as well. We had 13 properties. Wow. And of course, February 2020, nobody wanted to stay in an Airbnb, and we had 13 mortgages to pay, and it was a terrifying time. But my Confident on Camera course literally kept us all afloat and sold amazingly at that time, as you can imagine. And paid for all the mortgages, paid for everything else. And despite everything going on, homeschooling, I got sick with COVID for quite a long time, writing my book, I wasn't necessarily working huge amount of hours in my business, but it just beautifully ticked over and enabled me to still have a, really good safety net for everything that was, being hurled my way.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And you mentioned the gentleman, and I think I can't remember, but I remember somewhere on LinkedIn you mentioned this gentleman before, and it's just such a lovely story. But I mean, what other success stories have you got? Anything else that you can share from your program?
So we have lots of different people who, do the program. So Stan, who I just mentioned there, is like 81. Amazing. People like the lovely Leah Turner, who is this absolute phenomenon on LinkedIn. Yeah. And, she and I worked together. We created a LinkedIn course for her, and it really enabled her to step back from being on LinkedIn and doing one-to-one coaching to selling that. And, that Leah as a single mom, she really struggled during the pandemic. She won't mind me saying that. And it really gave her that freedom to step back so you can start managing your time a bit better. I just literally launched last week with Jerry Williams, who is this incredible, also on LinkedIn. She's incredible accountant behind Smooth Accounting, and she's built an amazing membership for her clients. Who, so it's very much about actually, rather than doing one-to-ones with people, she's still got her accountancy practice, but she's now built a membership for other accountants who want to grow successful accountancy businesses. And, it's can work with many different types of businesses, whether it's the legal industry, whether it's, coaching and teaching whatever skills you have, whether, it works because you are packaging up what you know and selling to a particular audience that needs that knowledge, that expertise. And it can be so diverse, from people wanting to, professional speaking skills. Caroline Goyder, who is, if you check her out on YouTube, she's got this incredible TED Talk about confidence and breathing. It's really good TED Talk. And she's used that as, I think it's got over 10 million views now. And she's used that as her sort of basis to then sell her courses. So there's many ways that you can do this. You could use, YouTube ads, Facebook ads, TikTok. It can work in a variety of ways. But the secret is that you are talking to your people, whoever they may be, and you're sharing your skills and expertise. And it really works, but gives you that freedom and flexibility as well.
And I mean, you're so passionate about this. I mean, I follow you on LinkedIn. It's been a LinkedIn morning today. We've done, we've had you're our third guest today. We've done a number of interviews, and we've had Leah, and then we've had Di, and we've got you. It sounds like it's a LinkedIn morning. So anyone, if you're listening back to back, you're going to feel that LinkedIn should be listening, because it's like we should be getting paid for promoting LinkedIn, but it is a fantastic platform, and we have met some wonderful people. I mean, when I look at you, Lucy, as I say, you're so full of energy and passionate and motivated, and you can see that you absolutely love what you do. What is your why? What is the why behind the passion?
I think for me, it's very much about wanting to create something that's there for my son, so that he has, a great life, but he also has me around. I am there I don't really work on a Friday because I take him to equine therapy. I'm absolutely there for school drop off and school pickup. So my days are quite, they're not long days. And having that flexibility really gives me those opportunities to be there for my son, which is absolutely key. But I'm also really motivated to help other people. And that has always been a massive driving force for me. And so I do that in two ways. Obviously, by working with people, I help them, inspire them to get going, to build that business. And that in itself is hugely rewarding. And I love that. But I've also always been driven by like a bigger purpose to help people. 20 years ago, I was working in refugee camps and was very, very motivated by helping women in particular in refugee camps try and find their voice, because many had gone through extremely challenging, disturbing, horrible situations. And so it was always about, I wanted to help them get their voice. And now as I, I'm 20 years on, I'm still that same passion, but I think it's not so much just about finding a voice. It's also actually now it's about wanting them to be able to be self-sufficient, because they leave everything when when people have to flee a war zone. They leave behind everything and they're completely traumatized, but also lost. They have nothing. And so for me, one of those big drivers is actually to be able to give back and help them through 5% of various projects, memberships, courses that I give back to organizations so we can fund entrepreneurial projects in refugee camps. And people can stay in a tent in a refugee camp for 20 years and it's absolutely soul destroying. But if they can get access to the internet, a laptop, they can suddenly create a whole new world and build a business. And that skill set in itself, I'm working with like UNDP and also like I've been badgering Facebook because I think there's so many opportunities to really create massive change. And rather than just giving handouts, it's giving people the skills,
education,
absolutely transform their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Goodness. And you're all about, as you've just said, motivating, inspiring and supporting. But even the strongest of us, at times, we can feel challenged and, we can sometimes hit a wall. And if that ever happened to you or if it has happened to you, what do you do to get unstuck?
Oh, okay. So this year has been hard. Okay. In fact, I was just writing an email about, I was listening to a podcast at the weekend and they were saying how the stress levels from the pandemic were equivalent to, and this was kind of quite a renowned MIT psychotherapist saying how the stress levels were equivalent to the stress of World War I and II. And I thought, wow, yeah, I suppose they were. And I think, for all of us collectively, we have gone through enormous turbulence. And I certainly with, businesses, all of that going on, my relationship imploded. And so moved out from being with my husband and, we had a very, very comfortable life and, homeschooling my son. In the midst of that, I also managed to write my book. So it's been a roller coaster of, 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And so all of that has definitely been incredibly stressful. And there have been times where I've, sobbed down the phone to my best friend who lives in Tasmania in Australia. Or, I really thought, I don't know how I'm going to keep going. And I've always been someone, I think I look at, all of my family, and I think my parents taught us a sort of inner strength. Being at boarding school was horrible. I hated it. And I was really severely bullied.
Right.
And it was, and living with a bully all the time who would strangle me and all sorts was awful.
Yeah.
And my dad used to send me these little postcards and, like with a picture of like elephants on or something. And just, he'd say, just keep plodding on, keep going. And I think that in those times of difficulty, that's all you can do. You can just keep going, you keep plodding on. Because when you do put one foot in front of the other, it does kind of come together. Even though when you're going through it, you might feel like I am wading through treacle and this is horrific. But it's those baby steps that incrementally get you out of that place into that better space. The other thing that really helped me in these last few years has been Reiki. Right. I've had therapy since I was in my early 20s, get over the whole experience of boarding school. Yeah. But I think, and I still, and going through all the divorce and everything, I, went to see various therapists, but Reiki definitely has been the thing for me in these past few years. I think working on that sort of energy level perspective has really, really helped me. I meditate once, if not twice a day. I make sure I run every day. So, you know, although my day is busy, I'll meditate first thing in the morning, just 10 minutes. I have a wonderful one from Gabby Bernstein that I just, you know, it's like 10 minutes, right? Okay, great. I can be in my little zone. I'll fit in the run after the school run, and then I crack on with work. But by doing those things, they keep me on track. If I don't go running, if I don't, I love cold water swimming as well. If I don't do those things, I definitely feel it. And, you know, so I have to make sure that I really do those things. I look after myself.
Yes.
I eat well. You know, that there are some days where I don't eat much all day, and then suddenly I eat, like, you know, I sort of raid Ben's chocolate supplies and whatever. And then I just feel, you know, you feel awful and really affects you. So I really make sure that I try to look after myself, particularly in times of difficulty. If you can do all of those things, you are setting yourself up for, okay, it's still going to be hard, but at least you're setting yourself up for being more resilient and coping with whatever is hurled at you.
Yeah, and we've actually touched on this a few times today in the other interviews that I've done, and it's about being responsible for your own happiness. And, you know, sometimes that's an incredibly hard thing to do, you know, when you feel as if the walls are crashing down around you. But it's so important, isn't it, to not just be a someone's, but to remember that you are someone and take responsibility for your health and your well-being, and that has a knock-on effect on your mental health and your strength and your self-confidence and the feeling stuck. And, you know, and like you say there about routine, you know, about building time into the day for you. And, you know, many of my clients say, oh, I haven't got time. But you have got time, because, you know, so anyone listening who says, I haven't got time, it's very much, isn't it, about, well, actually, I'll put this to you rather than me say, for someone who says they haven't got time, you're very busy. You're a very busy woman, businesswoman and a mum. How do you manage the time? How do you make the time for yourself?
I mean, it's hard. It's really hard. But if you don't do that, then I find that everything else kind of doesn't work as well and doesn't function. So carving out those pockets, like I say, you know, I do the school run. So I'm in my running kit when I drop my son at school. And then, you know, as I leave the school gates, I start running and I will run for half an hour. You know, I am not the most amazing runner in the world. I wasn't sporty at school. And I definitely granny run, as I call it. But I run. And, you know, and by doing that, I used to love, when I lived in London, I loved yoga, and I still love yoga, but actually getting to a yoga class, it's, you know, then you have to get to the class, doesn't happen. And, you know, it becomes much more of a faff. Whereas actually you could go running for half an hour. And, you know, I will, you know, and rather than saying to yourself, oh, I'll wait till, you know, I can't shower and dress, just run in your lunch break at work. You know, it's okay. No one's going to care for the afternoon, you know, just, it means that you've done that thing. You've got that exercise in, you felt much better about yourself. I mean, you know, in the winter, we don't really sweat when we run. Well, unless you're like super bionic, but I don't. So
I probably would never even break into a sweat when I run. I'll never be that fast.
Oh, I know, in the summer I'm like this, you know, I'm very fast, but, you know, I'm definitely sweaty. But the thing is that actually by, you know, just making those things non-negotiable, it is possible. I mean, I look at my brother. So my brother has always struggled with alcohol, and he came to stay with me in Beijing, and I was living in Beijing, and he came to stay. This is 2009, and he basically stayed for like 2 months while he was trying to stop drinking, and he's just completed his 16th Ironman competition and went to the world championships for Ironman. You know, you get to 10 and then you go. And, you know, my brother's like 50 something, and, you know, it is possible. He gets up at 4 a.m. to do it. You know, I mean, I don't think I could manage 4 a.m. Yeah. But the point is that there is always a pocket of time. You just make the choices of what is going to work for you and how you're going to carve out that time, whether it's in your lunch break, whether it's just after the school run, whatever it may be. But make those moments, because they really matter and they're really important to your mental health and your well-being.
And it's often just making that conscious decision, isn't it, to do it? It's like, you know, go and buy the trainers, or if you've got an old pair of trainers, just put them on and start, isn't it? And I think once you start, that's the hardest bit, isn't it?
Absolutely. I have replaced my trainers about a couple of months ago, and they were my old trainers from about 15 years ago. And when I started running on Christmas Eve 2020, and I was just sick of being yoga had stopped because of the pandemic, and I used to go 2 or 3 times a week, and yoga had stopped, and I was like, I'm sick of just going on tiny walks with my son because he doesn't want to walk very far, and being unhealthy. And I wanted something for me. I wanted actually just a small window of time that was mine and nobody else's. And actually, you know, I really credit running for, I think the reason that I gave myself, that gave me just a small window where I had the space and time to really think, what do I want in my life? And that was when I started having all these questions about my relationship and, you know, what was making me happy. And sometimes we're so busy, we're on this treadmill of life that we're just doing all the jobs, we're ticking off the list, we're doing the things, we're being, you know, the perfect mother, the perfect wife, the perfect whatever, that we don't really think, what do I want?
That's right.
And it's only when you give yourself that space that you can really start to ask those questions and allow yourself to really think, what makes me happy? And at the end of the day, the only person who is going to save you, who is responsible for your happiness, is you.
That's absolutely right. And interestingly, the very first question that makes my CEOs cry, or the women in business, and I don't go out to make them cry, but it's such a relevant question. And I ask them, who are you? And are you happy? How does happy feel? And you know, and that is goodness me, I haven't actually thought about my own happiness for such a long time. And then the tears come and it all comes out. But it is so important, isn't it? And it's not being selfish to be happy, is it? It's not selfish.
Absolutely not. You know, I had this sort of reckoning, I suppose, where I thought, do I want to do this for another 20 years? And I thought, no. And as hard as it has all been, and it's been really, really hard, our happiness is so important. And, you know, we only get one life. We just get, you know, those opportunities to actually create something beautiful, whether that's those relationships that we have, the relationships we have with our children, the things that we do, and those experiences really matter. And, you know, you can choose, do you want to keep plodding on doing the same thing because it's safe, it's what you've always done, or do you want to do something that really scares you silly, but actually on the other side of it makes you feel so much more alive, so much happier, and so much more you.
A beautiful horizon that you've never seen before.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Now, anybody who follows me on social media will know when I say the bloody book. They will know what I mean, because I've just finished writing the bloody book. And I know that it's no mean feat to write a book. And you've written your fabulous book. Tell us about it. Tell us about it and the experience and how you came to write your book, which I don't believe is a bloody book. You seem to really enjoy the process. So tell us about it.
So my book's called Make Money While You Sleep. And it's literally about turning your skills, your experience, your knowledge, taking that, de-chunking it from your brain, packaging it up into a course or a membership, and then selling it on repeat. So you create that passive income and make money while you sleep. And I was working with, so as well as building my own courses, I also have worked with various brands to help them build courses and do joint ventures. People like magazine brands like Psychology's magazine and other big brands, and also some, pretty big influencers. And one of those influencers said, "Oh, let me introduce you to my agent." And I was like, "Okay." And anyway, so I had a quick chat with her, and I said, "I'd really like to write a book called Make Money While You Sleep." And she was like, "Yes, I love it." And literally, it was probably the last tube ride that I took I was living in London at the time, into kind of central London. It was like beginning of March 2020. And so met Joe, my agent, and so we kind of hashed out this idea. Of course, then COVID struck and homeschooling and everything else. So I didn't really kind of think about it. I said, "Joe, I can't really cope with thinking about this." And so the following year we submitted, so it was, we were in lockdown again. I think it was like January 2021. We submitted my kind of idea and proposal, and literally got an email back from Hodder and Stoughton about publishing my book, and they wanted to publish it. And the deal was that the editor there, she loved it, and she said, "I really love this, but there's one thing you have to do." And I was like, "Oh God." And basically they wanted me to write it in 3 months. And we were still in lockdown, January, and we were literally just about to move house from London to the Cotswolds. So it was lots of change going on. So I said, "Okay, I will start when," and they gave me this deadline of July the 7th, 2021. And so I said, "Well, I can't start till my son goes back to school." So, which was the 8th of March. So I basically had 12 weeks to write a book. And, being a journalist, I'm used to cranking out copy. That's one thing that I am, I'm used to very tight deadlines. And I used to write, say you'd have 3 weeks where you were like covering, I don't know, Fukushima for the earthquake, or, some kind of earthquake was terrible. And you're literally working maybe 18 hours a day more, and you are, and you're just cranking out multiple stories, and you just lose track of how many words you write. You're just, out it goes. Yeah. And so for me, I knew I could do it. I just had to be focused. So, I set it up where I was working. I worked Monday to Wednesday on the business, and I did all my coaching calls and everything else. And Thursday and Friday were my writing days. And some days, now, if anybody's interested in writing a book, I would really recommend reading or listening to James Clear's Atomic Habits, which is the most phenomenal book about just looking at your habits and how you spend your time. And it's brilliant for all of these conversations we've had about, I don't have time, because actually when you look at your habits, you do have time. Yeah. Anyway, so from reading that book, I was like, okay, right, I can do this. I can make it happen. So I would kind of give myself a little bit of faffing time, because everybody just needs that to procrastinate a bit. And then I'd get going. And I did I'd do a chapter a week. So I did 12 chapters, one a week. And some days I would find myself that I'd faffed all of Thursday, and I'd be like, oh my God, going to bed. And then I find myself waking up. So I just go to bed really early, wake up at sort of 4 a.m. and just crank it out. And usually by the time I pick my son up for going to therapy, so that was picking him up at 12 o'clock, I would have done 8 hours. I'd have cranked out a lot. And it may be that I would do a bit more in that evening, and even going into Saturday, like wee hours of the morning, I'd do it before he woke up. But that got me a chapter done. And by writing a chapter a week, you're kind of in the flow, you get it done. It was doable. And so I got so I met the deadline of the 7th of July.
Amazing.
Quite
amazing.
But I really enjoyed the experience.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I was actually really relieved that they gave me such a tight deadline.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I know I would have procrastinated, and I would have taken a year, and I would have faffed around and struggled, and, because we just do. But when we have to do something, we deliver on it because we just have to. And so I'd love to write, once I've sort of got myself a bit more settled with everything here, I'd love to write book 2, and it's definitely, the brain is worrying about it. But I definitely want to have that same kind of impetus where I'm cranking it out, I'm getting it done, because otherwise I don't think, for me, having like a year to write the project, it would seep into everything, and I'd feel guilty if I wasn't working on it and all of that. Whereas actually having a really fixed period of time means you do get it done. Yeah,
definitely. And there might be people listening who think, I've always wanted to write a book. I really think I've got a great book in me, but I don't know where to start. What do you think is the art of creating or writing a great story or a book?
I think the most important thing, and James Clear really talks about this, is just starting.
Yeah.
Because the brain is so resistant to actually doing anything new, because we want to stay safe. We want to protect ourselves. And so we are resistant to learning a new skill, to starting a book, to starting running, or whatever it may be. We're resistant to that because it's new, and the brain has to use a lot more energy to do that new thing.
Yeah.
And so if you start, yes, you're going to faff around, and you might chunk a few chapters and say, oh, I don't like that. But actually by starting, you will surprise yourself how much you can do, how well you can do, and what you create.
Yeah, it is. It's key, isn't it? It's like anything. It's like putting the running shoes on, isn't it? It's starting. It's just starting. What do they say? Is it 21 days or something to break a habit? So 20, something like that, isn't it?
20, and then some people say 66, but whatever it is, once you start,
just get on and do it.
Yes.
You're halfway there, and it doesn't matter as long as you start. You're at least moving in the right direction, aren't you?
Yes.
So one of the things probably which stops many women starting is their self-limiting beliefs, thinking, I can't do that, and look at those people, they're doing all of that, and they must be super strong, and I'm not this and I'm not that. But I think there's a link, if anyone's listening who's listened to all of my podcasts, I think that there is an intrinsic link that we all still have self-limiting beliefs. Is it something that you've suffered from? And if so, how have you pushed through them?
Oh God, I have so many limiting beliefs. I, for many, many years, didn't think I was good enough or clever enough or enough, really. I would, use that as a story of why I couldn't do various things, and I would hold myself back from them. And, I on so many different levels, whether it was, being shy and speaking up in meetings, speaking up for myself. I was definitely, I'm quite an empath, and I would find myself as much more of the people pleaser, the one who was afraid to speak up. And I'm hugely a work in progress. But what I can say is that once you recognize that you have whatever limiting belief you may have, that the brain is a magnificent thing, that you can evolve. The brain, we're lucky enough to have neuroplasticity, that we can change and we can adapt. and, you know, if you choose to rewrite your scripts, I loved in my 20s when I started doing therapy, after several years of therapy, I basically left the UK and went to work abroad. But I took with me a book called Homecoming, and it was very much about rewriting our scripts. And I've always carried that as you can rewrite the way you behave. It's just you learned a pattern of behavior, you learned a way to think, and it's like how I was just on a podcast this weekend, and they were describing it as when you walk through a field, and if you're walking through the grass, if you walk backwards and forwards through that field every day, you're creating a new pathway. And so even though you've always gone from A to B, there's no reason you can't go from A to C. You just have to create that pathway to get there. And so once you recognize whatever limiting beliefs you may have, it is being able to say, you know what, I am going to consciously try this new pathway. And things like, I love hypnotherapy, NLP. I'm always very open to learning new techniques so that I can try and create new pathways. Whether for me, a good few years ago now, I really struggled with my weight. And that was one of the things was, comfort eating. And so that was learning new pathways of how to manage that, so that my, first reaction, if I felt emotional, wasn't to eat my emotions, to actually find other ways of actually writing out those emotions, or journaling or meditating to deal with my emotions. And, as I mentioned before, I was never a sporty person. I wasn't sporty at school. I'm, not very coordinated. But now people say, but you're really sporty. You're always swimming and you're always running. And I think, am I sporty? Because
you look very sporty. You always look sporty in something that you're doing, something sporty.
And that's the thing. Yeah, I'm actually in my yoga clothes, and I'll go to yoga a bit later. And I've just been for a run earlier. So, I am sporty, but in my brain that's an old wiring of I'm not sporty. And, so we can have these things, these limiting beliefs, but you can still overcome them, even though they might be there. That's a part of your brain. That's a part of you that's trying to protect you in some way. And so if you can recognize that inner child and say, rather than just dismissing them and say, don't be so stupid about this. Actually, by being kind to that inner child and by saying, it's okay, we're going to do this thing. It's a bit scary at first, but we'll be fine. And, sometimes I will have that conversation with myself. I'll often look in the mirror, and I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but I will be right, Lucy, come on. You can do this. And I will say it with a lot more force than that. But I will, say whatever it may be. I mean, earlier this year, I was I'd not driven since I had my son. I just sort of was living in London, and then my husband tended to drive. And so I just stopped driving. And, I've driven for many, many years, but I just stopped driving. And it got to the point where actually then it became like, I didn't want to drive. I felt scared of driving. And when we moved to the Cotswolds, I needed to drive. And obviously when I separated from my husband, I was suddenly like completely isolated. And so as I literally had to buy a new car, and 2 days later I moved out of our marital home, and I had to drive. And it was a great lesson for my son as well, because I was terrified of driving, absolutely terrified. And a girlfriend of mine drove me to the dealership. We picked up the car, and I literally had to just, she left me there. She had to go, and I had to just start driving. And I drove back. It was like a 40-minute drive back home. God. Oh my God! But I did it, and every day, and I'd say to my son, he's not very good at driving, but we're still doing it. And and he has learned through the experience of me overcoming my fear, not being great at something, because I'm not, but also doing it and getting better.
Yes.
So even now, like, he'll go, Mummy, you just parallel parked.
Oh, that's amazing.
Which, I'm still not great at it, but the point is, it's actually seeing in practice that when you do something, accepting, okay, this may not be your number one thing that you can do, but you can still do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a wonderful lesson, isn't it? We don't have to be great at everything on day one. We've just got to start and, and give it a go. I always say to myself when I'm scared of something now, come on, Sarah, you don't want to be lying on that deathbed saying you wished you had. You want to be glad you did.
That is so true. That's a great one. Yeah.
Even though I am terrified usually of whatever it is I'm trying to do. So you've got a mega busy life. You've got your business, you're a single mum, and you've got so much going on. How do you find balance to work on your business? Because that's often a thing that people say, I just can't get past this stage because I just don't have time to work on my business. I'm busy working in it. So they don't necessarily get the growth and they never really realize maybe the full potential. What do you do to make sure that, you're still working on your business and, it's still growing and moving forwards? What do you do? And what have you maybe got in the pipeline moving forwards? You've mentioned maybe a second book.
So for me, so I am lucky enough now. I have my courses, my membership, most of my digital products all set up and they sell themselves. So as long as I am doing some marketing, as long as my ads are working in the way that I want them to, when I've built those fundamentals, let's say those building blocks, they do the work for me. So actually it means I can step back a lot more. So for a lot of this year, I have, been coaching clients for a couple of days a week. But actually, as far as doing, working in the same way on the business, I had all the building blocks there. So I could step back, and actually I was, doing lots of divorce paperwork and moving house and all of these other things that actually took up an enormous chunk of my life. But during the pandemic, I was building a course for Psychologies magazine. I was actually building 4 courses for them. And we were under contract to build these courses. Plus then it was homeschooling, plus running my own business. And it was like, how am I going to find the hours in the day? And so there was a chunk of time where I was getting up at 4 a.m. and which sounds horrific, but actually I had to be in bed by 10 o'clock. I only need 6 hours sleep. So I'm lucky in that way. I only need 6 hours. So I would get up at 4 and I would basically do 3 hours work before my son woke up. And, bearing in mind, this was homeschooling days. So I'd have 3 hours where I consistently work on building those courses and we got it done. And that's the thing, that there may be a period, if you want to set up a business, I think one of the things about setting up a business is that you do have to work hard. Okay. There is, once you've built it and it's established and you've created various digital products or whatever it may be, if you're building an online business, it runs itself. But there is a period where you have to work hard. Okay, there is no getting around it. There are lucky flukes. I know a few who, when I was building my YouTube channel, I'm a plodder, and my YouTube channel does well, but I'm plodding. Now, I was in a sort of cohort with somebody called Vanessa Lau, who literally on video 5 got 1 million views, and her business just went, stratospheric. There are obviously people who are like that, who just get lucky and it flies. Yeah. But most of us are people that we have to put in the work. We have to put in the effort. We have to put in the work, and it does pay off. Obviously, that is, being consistent. That is, with a strategy, with a formula that is going to work. It's no point just scattergun splatting things at a wall. But you do have to recognize that there will be a period where you have to work hard, because that's the reality of it.
Yeah.
But once it's done, then you get that freedom and flexibility. And I think for so many people, they aren't willing to put in that work in that way that you need to. And so that is, you've got to be prepared to grit your teeth and just go through it and recognize that, people won't always understand. Like maybe your partner won't understand, or maybe I remember, my family didn't understand. Like my mum had no clue, and I just didn't really tell her. I just, you just don't tell people who aren't very supportive. So that's the first thing, that you've got to work hard. The second thing is that sometimes you work hard and then it doesn't quite work. And if it doesn't quite give you the result that you want, don't just say, oh, it's terrible, and bin it. That's a point when you've got to say, right, why is it not working? What can I do? What can I test and tweak and change and evolve to make it work? Because you've got this nugget of something absolutely brilliant, but there might be that you need to slightly, alter course or tweak the strategy, or, rewrite something, or just look at, okay, who am I selling this to? Am I absolutely honing in on the right audience, or whatever it may be? And so many people aren't prepared to look at the stats, to look at the data of where's my audience coming from, or, what social media platforms are working. Oh, I'm going to go all in on this social media platform. We talk about LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a brilliant platform. And I think lots of people, I'll stay on Facebook because Facebook's comfortable. But the algorithm isn't necessarily supporting you. And so you've got to be prepared to say, I'm going to work smarter. I'm going to learn something new, something different, whatever that may be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been an absolute joy interviewing you and listening to your story. But we're coming towards the end now. And I always ask if my guests would pay forward some advice, to the listeners. So just say, for example, we've got a listener listening, and they're saying, I feel so stuck. I'm at a crossroads and I just do not know which way to turn. What advice would you give them, even if it's just as a starting point?
Listening to ourselves and what we really want, rather than the noise of what other people want us to do, is so essential. Now, I mentioned before, I'm a people pleaser. And as women, as mothers, as wives, it is equally challenging to have lots of noise of other people's desires, attention, telling you what to do, whatever it may be. And we might carry on doing those things, and suddenly we get to this crossroads where we're like, okay, what do I want? And we genuinely feel like, I don't know which way is best, that, and your head might be telling you a ton of different ways. Yeah. And actually, by listening to that voice within and finding that voice within, can really be helpful. And that might be through journaling. That might be, I really like to meditate, and then using, I really try to be much more in tune with my intuition. I found myself in that sort of, particularly sort of in 2020, where I was very much ticking all the boxes, doing all the things. And I felt like I was really in that kind of masculine energy of doing, of strategy, and not really in the flow, using feminine energy. And so I started using Reiki to help me kind of, I basically had a Reiki session that somebody gifted me when I was really sick with COVID. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll buy some Reiki sessions from the person, because she was sweet enough to offer me a free Reiki session. So I didn't really know how it was going to work out and what effect it was going to have on me. But I found that I was using it more to get into that state of flow. And I wanted to get back to flow rather than feeling doing and pushing and striving, to be like where things just flowed, things happened, and good things came to me. Yeah. And so very much by allowing that intuition, like I went for a run earlier today, and I, stopped on a bench, just, halfway around my run. And I listen to meditations as I run, which people might think is a weird thing to do, but it gets me in kind of a zone. And I sat on a bench and I put on a meditation for, it's like, amazing meditations on YouTube. One, Reiki Rachel's a great YouTube channel. And I put one on for 10 minutes. And I just closed my eyes and sat there and, it was a visualization, but it enables you to really figure out what do you want. And I came back out of that meditative space, having so much, just feeling so much more peaceful, but also having some clarity about things. And there were definitely, things that I've got going on where it's like, okay, I can, things that are really, really hard and upsetting for me, but actually I had some peace around them and some clarity. And when you allow that inner voice to guide you rather than the should do's and being told what to do by other people, or just what your brain is telling you what you think you should do, and listening to that voice within, because we know our gut instinct. We know it. Intrinsically, there is a gut instinct, but often we choose not to listen to it, and we listen to what we think we should do. And when we listen to that voice within, that's when the magic happens. That's when we make the very best decisions. And they might seem weird to people at the time, but they always work out in the right way. Yeah. And so allow yourself to follow those, true, what you actually really want, what your heart desires, what you really want, rather than what you think you should do.
Yes. That's what a way to end that. I mean, that is absolutely wonderful, wonderful advice, Lucy. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you, maybe buy your book, follow you, where can they find you?
So I'm lucygriffiths.com. So a lot of my social media is lucygriffiths.com. So whether that's YouTube or LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook. And my book is Make Money While You Sleep, which is available at all good bookstores and on Amazon and on Audible. And would love to get to know you more, and hopefully you enjoy listening or reading the book.
Oh, Lucy, thank you so very much. And thank you for listening to the Formidable Over 40 podcast. Thank you so much to the incredible Lucy for joining us and sharing her advice. You can find more information about the things we've discussed to this episode in the show notes. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on future episodes. And please do share this podcast with anyone you think will enjoy it or needs it.